Yeah, Eric, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thanks so much. This will be fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's not fun, then unfortunately there's no refunds, you know. But
Exactly right.
I do appreciate the effort.
Of course. Yeah. It's always, like any Zoom meeting, the effort of making sure the mic and this and that all is working.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
fix everything going up, but if the internet decides to just go down, I am at the mercy of the electricity gods on this one.
Right. So no worries. It's our efforts will be rewarded, I'm sure.
Well, to start, I was first introduced to you because it was actually my first time attending Winter Film. Because a number of people that I've had on the podcast, had some things in there that they also had in the festival, and they ended up, putting it into. And then you had two actresses who have actually been on my podcast. If I talked to them and I've had some experience with them in the past. It was Brandy Bakken and Ashley Lawhorn, I believe, for Maps. Am I
Mm-hmm.
correct? Yeah, and I that was a very uh, touching movie in its own way. And then I saw those two other short films that you sent me, and I can see this common theme of almost like the same way like Pixar types likes to tell
Yeah.
stories, and they associate metaphors with particular characters.
Right.
Well, but before I get into that, just tell me about yourself, how you got started, and just introduce yourself first to the audience.
Well, I am Eric Bosso, and that is how it's pronounced if you've only ever seen it written down.
It's not Bozo.
Um, yeah, correct,
You're not a
correct. Yeah.
bozo. Okay.
Can you imagine me, a clown? Awfully big shoes to fill. Anyway, I am a filmmaker, but I started out wanting to just be a writer, and then that turned into screenwriter, and then that turned into just I fell into acting in my pursuit of doing that type of thing, and had a bunch of medical stuff that I'm sure we'll get into later, but then pivoted into comedy and whatnot. So and photography. So I've got all these different hyphens, but mostly I'm a comedian and filmmaker out of Columbus, and I make all sorts of different stuff. But these past few years, this festival down in Cincinnati, I've kind of fallen into a pattern of making some pretty heavy art house drama type things. So
Hmm.
that's me.
Like adult Pixar,
Yep, explicitly, yeah. There's one that's what if a mechanical pencil had a voice, and yeah,
Yeah. Well,
it
the
was
one
very
thing,
well received.
because I do sympathize with that, because I spend most of my time doing writing primarily, and so it's the being able to give something a voice, not just like a character, but you start to have these meta conversations inside of your head about
Right.
what particular philosophies end up coming around as a result of that. But tell me how, because you do a couple things, and so that was the
Hmm.
trick of, like, I'm thinking, huh, like, what am I gonna interview this guy about? Because you're a comedian, you're a writer, you've done some acting, you've done some directing. Um, Tell me about the dichotomy first, about the all of your different interests, because you have a lot of things that interest you.
Right. Um, I mean, I think it all comes from if you're sensitive to things sounding pretentious, tune out now because I'm gonna be that. But all these disparate things kind of do revolve around the axis of being an artist. Like with the stand-up thing. A lot of the image of the mainstream comic is somebody that's up there trying to be funny and cool and interesting and like smoke a cigarette and like a character and all that stuff. And I'm trying to be an artist about it. And like same thing with filmmakers. Some people are trying to be craftsmen and entertainers. Some people want to make you just want to be known as that's the guy that does the horror movies that are like this. But yeah, it's everything comes from a sort of artistic pathology that I can't control. But um, uh, but yeah, I mean, all the the artist brain stuff, the all that stuff. Eventually, you have to learn the tech and the cameras and the gadgets in order to,
Mm-hmm.
and the tools and stuff, and that's kind of where, in my pursuit of things, like, the storytelling is a aspect of filmmaking and like writing film, which was my initial interest. But that that storytelling tool can be used as a comedic, you know, tool for that art or whatever. But that's my general explanation of how I can manage all those things, and why I continue to do it is that they're completely different types of artistic outlet. Like when we like write a movie or something and we making it, we build it, and like we know what it is and we want it to be, and then it's done, and then it's like audience ownership, and it's like you made that thing, and like it's released, and like you get the feedback and whatnot, and it's done and it's over. But with comedy, like, uh, there is the audience ownership when I tell the jokes and they have part of that experience, but I'm still there and I can like read the room and like make a micro adjustment. Like this
You get
Maps
live
movie.
feedback.
Yeah. Like that, my example is like this Maps movie, like, has a lot to do with like organ donation and whatnot. And so if I were making that movie and then suddenly the administration illegalizes organ donation for whatever reason, like that's something I can't control. That's something that like puts it, kind of cements it in itself and in time or whatever. But like, the doing uh, comedy and film, like specifically, those are the two uh, polar opposites of this world I'm in.
Hmm. Well, you strike me as a creative whose creativity is best. It thrives best in solitude. Am I misreading you?
It's definitely
Preferential.
been yeah, for sure. It's definitely helped it and inspired it. I mean, I mean, this most recent Maps movie, I think, uh, that movie has a story with events that happen, but it's more about the theme for me, which is, these two sisters represent,
Hmm.
uh, uh, Ashley is the alone artist that gets it all out of her system, and I don't know if I expressed it enough visually, but she wishes she was more like her sister, who could be interpersonal and have friends and be social and whatnot. And I think it
One was
is
more emotionally disconnected than the other.
right. And I do think, with those two types of people, that is the two people inside of me that love each other and are jealous of each other and whatnot. It's kind of. I remember when I this was the first pretentious idea I came to on myself was, when I was a kid. I was like watching Friends, and I'm like, man, I see a little bit of all of these. Wait a second, is that just what a good ensemble is? It's just, you know all the aspect. Everybody's a little bit of Rachel. Everybody's a little bit, Joey and whatnot. So I
Hmm.
think everybody's got their little alchemy of percentage of, with the Maps thing, in terms of, you know interpersonal versus artistic. For Maps, it was explicitly grief, but I mean, I think people do that to cope with just normal life,
Well, it
either
struck me
being.
like it wasn't just about grief. It was also about there's a word that summarizes getting over grief. Move, or it's like
Right.
it's slipping my mind. It was also about like just not reconciliation. It's like just moving on. It's
Right,
just the process of actually just moving on. But the only way to move on is to
right.
go through it.
And that is a part of grief, and like I feel like whenever death or loss, is in a movie. It's just like they it is the tragedy, it is the viewer losing the character, it is everybody else like in shock and whatnot. But like, unless it's like a movie about grief or whatever, like it's not really. There's a lot of things to loss that yeah. It's,
What were the things that you said to Ashley and Brandy in order to be able to give them grounds to give an emotive performance?
Well, I have to confess I haven't watched their episodes of your show here, and I don't know how much of their own
Oh, no. Well, so what we're
tragic
going to do is we're going to stop the
backstories.
podcast right now, and then you're going to go back and watch 3 hours, because not only were they on, but I also noticed in doing some research on you that you also know Jules, who is in the
Yeah.
comedy scene up there, and she was like one of my among my first 10 guests, and so yeah,
Well,
you got some stuff. We're going to pause right now, and then you're going to go and do your homework.
wardrobe change. Yeah. I don't know where they've talked about it or not, and I'll respect their privacy, but obviously it's a general draw from your own loss, whether it's literal or not in life. But that was even. I don't even think I explicitly had to say that. I mean, I think
The strength is in the writing. You feel like you just
yeah,
communicated it
yeah,
properly on the page.
yeah. I won't call it strength, but power. There's such thing as bad power.
I mean, we're here to
It's
be
a potent.
pretentious, man. I don't know about
Yeah,
you, but
yeah,
like we're
yeah.
just go ahead.
If you read some of the stuff I write on papers, like, oh man, fuck, that is too much. Like, how can you make that work? But it's yeah, it was definitely in the writing, and in a very literal sense, there is in the movie, the big emotional highlight, everybody says, is that Brandy reads this note from the organ donation company telling them about how their father's corneas have been harvested for donation, and it's literally just her reading that letter, which I got, in real life, and it was, man, they are both just so professional. It was literally okay. Okay, I remember the one direction I did. I think we had to. We knew we were gonna get at least two angles of that big crying reading the letter scene, and so we did have time to reset in between for one, and uh yeah, just I just told her she was reading a letter. That
Hmm.
was my direction to everybody that just read a letter in that movie. Is like, you don't be sad about it. Don't this, that, the other. It's like, you are reading this out loud, and yeah, it is. Yes, it is a character moment, but it is functional to the story. And I think if anything, I don't know. Every moment, every line of dialogue has to serve characterization, the plot, or some form of engagement, like entertainment. And ideally, that would also be one of the other two things. So
Why did you particularly decide to approach the topic in the way that you did when it came to just the nuances of filmmaking when it comes to each department, being able to portray a particular you know um, aspect of the film, because all those things, all those layers have to congeal together properly in order to actually deliver visually the emotion that the actresses were trying to convey.
right. I mean, it's definitely easier when it's a small cast and crew, and on these small locations, and these uh it's these past three, it's all the movies have a low scope but huge scale, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's but being being in, you know, those that living room and that van, and like there not being much motion, and like yeah, it's kind of like being in a, like seeing a play, or like just being trapped in a shoebox with them. It's just a very objective, there's not much distractions, and it's kind of forcing you to
Mm-hmm.
you know, listen to these letters and the information that these people are receiving, and you know, with the context that you have, which is their dad is dead, and you can kind of, anybody with a reasonable amount of emotional intelligence can like kind of know that something is going on. And I think the challenging part of it is letting yourself uh, imagine something that is, you know, worse than what you're going through. No, it's they call, you know, some video game journalists call video games the empathy machines, because you know, it's forcing to. I mean, that Last of Us stuff. I don't know if you're into the conversation around that stuff, but I mean, that's
I've watched like I'm like behind on my episodes for Last of Us. So I'm like season 2, like 3, episode 4, something
mhm,
like that. I forget where I'm at, but
right, right,
I've heard mixed reviews, honestly.
right, right. Well, even just the moral relativism, you know, the you understand why somebody does something. I don't know. It's just that it has that. Oh, and in terms of the empathy machine, like you had a whole first season to understand what Joel was thinking and feeling, and then when he makes that terrible decision at the end, you know exactly why. And
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's interesting, like in a movie, like you'll see it and you'll understand, and like there is, you know, they say that you're complicit as a viewer, like watch, but like when it's a video game, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm this guy, and in this situation, I do this, and like that, like even though it's like killing dudes and left trigger, right trigger, it's like that is empathy. That is like, oh, this person wants this and feels this, and that's a healthy muscle to kind of flex. So if I make people more sad than they are comfortable being, and I don't win the vote for popular best movie, then that's fine. I think if I'm letting people get some emotions out, or making people
Well,
stronger,
that's kind of the role of the
that'll be
filmmaker,
nice.
though, or really just the storytellers, to be able to push the audience out of their comfort zone in
Right,
multiple dimensions of their personality. So, if you're making a sad movie, you have to, you almost have to violate their unconscious in some way in order to step back into that um, area of their psychology that is vulnerable, that causes them to connect with what's happening. You know, because
right,
everyone has that little bit of a wall going up, and you have to be able to make something that either slips through the cracks or just breaks it down entirely. And
right,
that's
right,
sort of
right.
that's the real art of storytelling. You know, no matter what medium you're in, you know, whether it be writing a book, you know, music, or even movies and shows and that sort of thing. It's that it's that art of being able to get people to connect. That ultimately is what storytelling is.
Right. Yep.
What to you? What makes an idea worth pursuing and committing your time to? Like, what
What?
possesses you and says, "I need to do this"? You know, because creativity is just endless amounts of curiosity. But when you're going to pursue an idea, generally there's something that just that it almost feels like it possesses you, that you have to get it done.
Right, right, right. Oh, it's more like a I'm not going everywhere telling people, dude, I have to breathe. I love breathing, man. It's so like it's that
Well, it makes
artistic.
one of us. I prefer people to know everything, every little
I
thing that
mean,
I'm thinking.
I
That's all.
mean, I I only love it when I can't, you know. Otherwise, like I am able to focus and not be giddy on set, and like, you know, hashtag actor's life, look at us, like, hey everybody, look at me, I'm a
Clout.
yeah, because like I it's uh it is a compulsion. It is a need. It is not a um, I don't. I think what was the question again?
Well, it's just what makes you what makes an idea worth pursuing? Because
Right.
we have endless amounts of ideas, and
Right.
ultimately,
Right.
if we're going to pick one, we're going to sacrifice the time to all these other ideas that we think also might be worth our time. But there's always that one that sticks out, and so I'm really
Right.
asking about the filtering process that you personally go through as a creative, like not just necessarily filmmaking, but also you know what kind of joke you actually want to
Oh
go
yeah. Yeah.
for and
Well, I
what
mean that's
style.
right.
It's
Right.
more about just the nature of creativity itself.
Yeah. I mean, the comedy is the biggest net. You know, all of my ideas or whatever. If there's something worth gleaming on to, like I will do it in that first. And if I'm making jokes about how lonely I am, you know, yeah, I went to the pet store to buy a parrot, but none of them really spoke to me. Where they were all sold out, they just flew off the shelves, etc.
That's funny, honestly. Yeah,
If I find myself keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that, well shit, maybe I do have to make a movie about this stuff. But in terms of when to make a movie, I'm that is that's partially a art meeting commerce, you know, unfortunate reality of life is just like it's fucking expensive and hard and like I'm not good at interpersonal stuff, and it's hard for me to convince people to help me do these things without first making something amazing to show them and say, "See, I'm not crazy." And it's just been a struggle to do that. But honestly, there is part of it that I can control that I don't that I should. Like I've only done things for contests. I've only done winter films and 48s and like horror film festivals and like a music video like competition type thing. I've never like I've done a couple documentary things like for myself and like on my own time. But in terms of like making a movie on my it's like it's almost uh if I start doing that whenever I know I'll like burn myself out on a practical level. So if I'm have there's two or three. There is Columbus 48, usually do some kind of comedy type thing. There's this winter film in Cincinnati where I fell into this dramatic hole, and there's usually something going on in the horror months. And I do act and do the photography and BTS for other productions and whatnot. But in terms of stuff that I produce and write and direct myself, it really is it does take a lot out of me. And even this most recent time in February, like for when we filmed the winter film stuff, like I was looking forward to making a comedy, but then you know my dad died in December, and I was like, oh shit. I
Hmm.
guess the next movie I'm gonna make is gonna be in a couple months, and it's gonna be a Cincinnati like drama thing. And it's like, I guess here we go again. I made two super sad drama type things, and I thought
Well,
I
one
got
of
that
the
out of my
aspects of
system.
art,
And
though, is that artists make art in order to create the part that they're missing in themselves to heal themselves. It's like
right,
you got that little hole, but you decide to fill it with something that's creative. Like the Japanese type of like pottery work where they interweave a broken pot
yeah, yeah,
with
the
the
gold,
golden,
yeah,
the
yeah.
golden, and I forget the actual word, but the purpose of
It's
that is,
Japanese.
yeah, it is that's why I don't remember. I don't speak Japanese, but that concept is very reminiscent of what artists use their art to do. Sometimes
Right,
comedy it's meant to heal in one aspect, but it can't do the thing that other aspects of art or other types of art can also do when it comes to healing the soul.
you're right,
And
right.
we
And
hope
I
that
don't, I
we
that
heal
that is,
we heal
yeah,
ourselves by creating the thing, and if anybody else is sharing that similar feeling, maybe that other piece of art that we created will also do something, good for the audience's soul.
Right. That is true, and there is truth to that. And I was mentioning earlier about how it was a compulsion, a pathology, because uh, I I do it to heal, but I would be doing it anyway. I don't want to make it
Hmm.
seem, and like I don't want to here. Okay, here's
Like
a
make something
honest.
that Trabendums.
Right, yeah, yeah. And here's me being honest and vulnerable here. I do think I do have an insecurity, a projection that people, see me and my weirdness and eccentricities and my uh I'm very depressed and very open about it and fucked up, and but I don't want to buy into the image of you need to be hurting to do stuff like that. And like I feel like people that just want to make something that aren't fundamentally like fucked up can get
Hmm.
frustrated at people like me sometimes. It's like it's not I don't want to make it seem that it is just from um
You don't want to feel selfish.
a place of pain. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, and sometimes
I would
indie
be doing it,
filmmakers.
and but maybe it is, but just not on a good scale. If I'm happy and whatever, and then there's no fundamental like thing that I'm going through, I'll still take pictures of whatever. Maybe it's because my knee hurts and I don't know it. Maybe it's something. Maybe I'm hungry.
Uh-oh.
I lost your camera.
I got
Okay,
it.
there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, the
Maybe.
internet gods are like trying to fuck with things. That's
Right. So maybe it is the same type of thing, and maybe like if you if you really want to make something that is vulnerable and honest and not just an entertainment piece of content type thing, like maybe consider more about uh how you are hurting, or what you want, even if it isn't something obvious as obvious as being depressed or not having any friends or dad dead or this or that or the other. And then
mm-hmm.
I see a lot of people in the community that get depressed because they're not as good artists as they want to be. And uh, I
Sometimes the
think
worst, like, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that can come from a place of assuming that you had to be some eccentric whatever, some kind of fundamentally broken or flawed thing, but not
I
all.
think one of the biggest pitfall I think some artists actually fall into is not the comparison to others. Actually, it's actually the comparison to the person that the art type of artist
Yeah.
they know they could be, and
Hmm.
so
Or
now it's
want to
just an
be.
intern, yeah, or want to be, and they're
Hmm.
internally wrestling with both reality as well as their potential. And so like you're
Right.
disappointed where you're not where you could be, but
Yeah.
you're
Who you
and also
are and what's
dissatisfied.
expected of you. It's very Mad Men. It's
It's also about what you
identity.
expect of yourself, though, too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
expectations you place on yourself that sometimes an artist might misattribute to others, because they're projecting it onto them. But then there's other aspects that I think more often than not ends up being an in-house debate for the person.
Right.
But
Yeah.
tell me, because you do comedy, you've done acting. Which art form to you personally is the most creatively rewarding?
Creatively rewarding. Um, I mean, I think on a literal level, it probably would be, if I'm divorced from all my other hyphens and I'm only doing one thing. I think rewarding wise, it would be screenwriting because
Mm.
you have the idea and then a lot of people ideally have a billion more ideas in service of that idea to make it even better and visible and audible and shareable. And I would consider that a reward for creativity. But I mean, people, a lot of people laughing at a joke you made that when you're on stage, it feels as good as you think it is, and like especially when I do this thing. It's somebody asked me when I'm on stage, is that a character? Or is that an extension of your personality? And I just say I don't know. Usually very,
Depends on the day.
yeah, my friend dropped an album, and so I picked it up and I handed it back to him.
Hmm.
He's that guy. It's I don't know how to explain it outside of just doing my comedy, but
How
it's
do you like to structure your jokes?
I definitely am like a classic like one-liner guy. It is usually, a misdirect type thing, and I usually, like I just did, sometimes will deliver puns without holding your hands as to whether it is a pun. My friend dropped an album, so I picked it up, so I handed it back to him,
Kind
type thing.
of like a Jimmy Carr type of comedy.
Yeah, I mean, it's Emo Phillips and Mitch Hedberg and Stephen Wright. It's the one-liners are funny on paper, but the character and the delivery that really you make and it's not all like clean, so there's dirty, like I'll do they're basically dad jokes with sometimes they're dirty, sometimes they're political, sometimes they're not, and you never know what kind of laugh you're gonna get out of it. And then sometimes it'll be, yeah, I don't know, just surprises. Jeffrey
Yeah.
Epstein wasn't well hung.
See, I mean that's a good one. Well, the trick is, I think, from what I've noticed when it comes to watching comedians, is that the hardest deliveries are the one-liners, because if you're there's some comedians that are storytellers, and they'll keep leading you on, like, is the next sentence the punchline, and you're trying to
Right,
track with them, and you're not sure when the punchline's coming, and so there's this buildup of anticipation when it comes to
right.
being a storyteller type of comedian. And
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly, once they feel like, okay, it's never coming, then you drop the one liner on them, and
Right,
then
right,
that's
right.
what is funny. But the
The
the strength is the
expectation, yeah,
weakness.
the surprise, yep, yep. And I've been dancing around. My best example is my closer, and I guess I'll just say it. And it is movie related, so it's good. But in terms of uh, setup, not as a joke setup, but setup for uh, subversion, expectation. It's have you ever noticed there one alien in the movie Alien, multiple aliens in the movie Aliens, one predator in the movie Predator, and multiple predators in the Catholic Church? And that that is kind of the in terms of written. I've got other ones, but I mean that's a good the prime example of something that is a one-liner. It is based off of, it is funny on paper, but it's the misdirect and the expectation and the little bit of dirtiness of it. The dad,
Hmm.
the perception of a dad joke is, you know, funny is funny, wit is shit, but I'm trying to challenge that. And also the idea of somebody going on stage with the intent of saying something funny and then that thing not being as funny as they expect, that is inherently funny.
Yeah.
And like that energy, that's why I'm okay with them not getting the dad jokes at first, because I will I will say, something, and like expectantly look to audience to, you get it, funny, right? And like that is what they laugh at, is the energy of
Do you like play the awkward comedian? And then sometimes the yin and yang is there's the dad joke, and then there's the character that you're playing reaction to the audience.
it is the character thinks these dad jokes are funny and is just so patient with you, and really waiting for you to catch along, and it's that uh, obliviousness that some people, it's hard to accept that as being intentional on my part, because I act like a big dumb idiot in real life, and people assume that I'm doing the same thing on stage, but it's all on purpose.
Right. Do you find yourself feeling more like an actor on stage when you're doing comedy as opposed to a comedian?
Um, kind of. Almost more. I feel more like a. I mean, it's easier for me to get in character during comedy than uh, acting. I think like
Because
it's
do you feel like you're
easier
playing
for me.
a version of
Ye-
yourself that you can it's more easier to sift into?
Well, see, I don't know. I mean, that's the when they ask, is it an extension of your personality or a character? I say I don't know, because I don't know. I just, that's how, like, I know it's a mode. Oh, okay. Here's perfect. You're white, Severance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I've been approaching it now as it's an innie outie thing. Like when you're on stage, all your immediate traumas and bullshit and baggage like leave, and it's just your core fundamental like person. And like if you are broken at that level, that's still there, but like all the other shit kind of like goes away. And like if you're doing it right, people see like your true self, as it were. So
Tell me
that's
about your
another
first
idea.
show, because the first show is always the most nerve wracking.
Yeah. So I had already been a filmmaker and screenwriter and already done comedies. I know I can write funny things, and I can get laughs like conversationally. But after some medical things, I had at one point I had a so I was at the dialysis clinic and getting dialysis, and I was getting off, and they're like, yeah, something up, and I'm like, and I couldn't say anything. They're like, oh, you might be about to have a stroke or seizure.
Oh,
And so they like, my dad take me to the ER, and they're like, yeah, you're definitely you're showing signs of about to be having a stroke or seizure. So let's put you in this brain scanning machine. So they take me to the brain scanning machine. They drop me on the ground on the brain scan machine. And they pick me back up, and they put me into this um, brain scan machine, because they're concerned that I'm about to have a seizure. So I'm in this machine and I have the seizure, and I'm fucking flipping around and shit. So anyway, I've got
for
a
me, it would
broken
just be
shoulder.
claustrophobia. It would just be
Right? Yeah.
claustrophobia, you know?
Yeah. I've got this broken shoulder. I've got when they dropped me, my leg bent like hyperextended the wrong way. So I'm like walking with a cane. I've got my sling on, like and I'm a big, huge guy. I always stick out and whatnot. And like I'm just chilling in my cast and cane and whatnot. And I see on Facebook that somebody says, "Hey, there's a open mic tonight." And I'm like, man, I've always fantasized and then dreamed and then aspired, and then like it's always became more and more realistic and ambition. I'm like, dude, I've got all this shit on me. I look ridiculous. People are going to be staring anyway. Might as well just have my first set be, it's the guy with the cane, and had all my one-liners on little index cards. I was still convinced, if it's funny on paper, I don't really have to do anything beyond that before I discovered my stage persona, character, whatever. But yeah, it was. I had a couple friends. It was good. It worked. I was in bands and in the orchestra and stuff in high school, so it wasn't my first time like being on stage in front of people, and yeah, it was a fun time, and I kept at it. That was a good
How long ago
artistic.
was that?
That was March of 2021, so over 4 years now at this point.
Okay, gotcha. Do you think anything should be off limits in comedy, or do you think it should just be the wild, wild west?
I think people should be when people say the shit that they say. I mean, it's the classic freedom of speech, not freedom from consequences.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
that's true.
like if the Kill Tony crowd wants to pander to whoever the fuck and say racist, transphobic shit, then like the people that hate that will hate that, and unfortunately, the people that eat that up will eat that up, and like it is I mean, specifically with the Kill Tony, Joe Rogan, like all that stuff. It is, I tell an Uber driver I'm a comedian, and they say, "Oh, so like that." It is the touchstone. People think comedy is that, and like it sucks. It fucking sucks because you can make a joke about everything. I mean, it is. I do like remember when the train derailed in East Palestine?
Yeah, yeah, in Ohio. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember
Yeah,
that.
that huge plume of smoke up in the air. And all that, it was really bad for the environment. The EPA came, it was a whole, I don't know if you remember, and I was like, I was kind
That got
of
kind of
upset.
pushed under the rug. I never heard anything about that
Yeah,
again, but I guess some
I
people are
know
like
it.
testing the water right now, and
You're
it's
right.
not looking good. And I don't know. I don't know. I feel
So
like I'm being kept in the dark on that, honestly.
I went on to Twitter and I said, see, this is why I hate trains, people. And then J.K. Rowling followed me. And I said, no, J.K. Rowling. I said, this is why I hate trains, people. Now that is a joke about trans people, but that's making fun of J.K. Rowling. We don't have to pretend like that shit doesn't exist. In fact, like we need to highlight it's you know what I mean? Like it's and it's kind of, I mean, even think about how much, I mean, I don't want to divide your community, but think of how much support for Palestine you've seen online versus how much you've seen in person.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's there's stuff that people need to sort their shit out in terms of what is real and what isn't, and this whole uh, I know why you asked that question. Should comedy be off limits and this and that and the other? And like people should be able to have the freedom to find where the line is. Some people say that comedy is the act of finding where the line is.
I would
But
agree with that.
if you aim for the other side of the line, of course you're going to hit your mark. Of course it's going to be fucking too much. You could say, I think people this color are this, this, this. And it's like, it will be objectively too much. But it's like, if there's a little, you know, if I do happen to make an accurate observation about a community that I'm not a part of, but it truly is accurate, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's that is that is that is good. But the pursuit of something like that, people uh, want to make it seem like they're braver than they are by.
Well, the
being
question also
shitty.
comes from I attended a local. It was actually my first live comedy show, and it was put on I think by 4x3 down here in Cincinnati, and you know
Mm,
they started doing comedy I think around COVID or something like that. But there was one comedian in particular who stood out to me, and he was quite a wiry guy. Seemed like a very nice guy, but I noticed like a lot of the comedians before him, they were very willing to to test where the line was, in terms of
right,
being offensive or something like that,
right, right, right,
and it was really interesting watching the comedians actually calibrate off the audience of like
right, right,
where that was, and that's just from a psychology standpoint, that was a fascinating thing to watch. But there was
right.
one comedian who seemed very none of his jokes ever seemed to test that line, and
Mm-hmm.
he was trying to play it very safe, and it seemed like he was very like he didn't like he was so afraid of offending people that he couldn't find the comedy, and that's a
Right.
little bit of the dynamic where that question originates from, is because in order to find the comedy and the irony in something, you have to be willing to point something out that you subjectively think is true, but somebody else might find that offensive,
Right,
and
right.
so you got to. It's kind of like a. It's not necessarily the Wild Wild West because a lot of territory has been explored when it comes to, what group gets more, you know, gets more attention, than the others,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to either being picked on or something like that. But if you're not willing to, he bombed. I remember
Yeah.
him, but he bombed because seemed very. All of his jokes were structured around, finding. There was He was trying to find a sweet spot, but it seemed like his range of territory willing to explore had a very narrow bandwidth.
Was he talking about his life, his self personally in a way that was not relatable?
Yeah.
That's where some people, there's a fine line between, I did this, and isn't that so me versus I did this, isn't that so human of me? I think did you ever see God, Everybody Wants Some? It was the spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused.
No, I haven't seen that.
It's set in the 80s, and it's about this guy who joins a college baseball team, and he starts dating a theater nerd, and they go to a country bar, and they're all listening to disco, and I'm not into any of that. But
Mm-hmm.
because it was so specific and personal, it was universal. Like the way that they interacted with and consumed and loved the things that they loved, even though it wasn't the same as me, it was in the same way. And I think that people have a sense of that kind of thing, that people know that when they hear somebody talk about themselves and they hear themselves in it, that that is a thing you can do. And I think sometimes people can aim for that, but it just ends up being a diary entry, you know?
Mm-hmm. How much of your time do you spend writing for comedy versus writing for the screen?
Um, the process of me writing for comedy is because it's usually like a wordplay thing. It is me just being an idiot and misunderstanding things. It my friend
Kind of like Modern
literally
Family, where
in
everything's a
the
misunderstanding.
I guess I mean that's fundamental, like, but I th I literally had a friend say that he just dropped an album, and in my mind when he said that, I thought he meant that he dropped it on the ground, and that's where that joke came from. And like it's usually a thing like that,
Where you take the metaphor literally.
where I hear somebody say something and I don't understand because I'm different,
Mm-hmm.
and I just I I'm constantly either through dissecting other people or dissecting myself, trying to find exactly what that difference is and exploit it through grammar and homonyms and shit for the sake of humor and art and love.
Hmm. When you're making a film, what is the process once you feel that the script is completed enough to try to get it off the ground? Who are you contacting, and how do you like to source your cast and crew?
Well, usually when it's these competition things that the filmmaking community knows about, I'll ask, you know, people beforehand. And I've got my usual crew just about set, and I've got my roster of actors, and every time I release something, a new big successful and popular person will say, "Hey man, I really want to work with you," and kind of like leapfrogs like that. But yeah, I mean, I usually am writing something for somebody. Like I don't really cast as a verb much. I write for. So and same, with these time-based competitions, and one of the only things you're allowed to do ahead of time is location scout. So like if I do that and like I know that it's going to be like have a restaurant or whatever, then I know to write for a restaurant. So when the script is done, a lot of the pre-pro, as it were, is already in the can. I like to read through the whole thing, and then with every like block of dialogue, like a conversation, I like to break that out into chunks of, all right, from this question all the way through this question and answer, we're gonna film it with this coverage, and then I'll draw a line and say, okay, then this is where they walk over to here, and the camera will change this, the other. It really is kind of a. I don't explicitly storyboard that much, but it really is just drawing on the script to know for myself more than anybody what the order of operations for shooting it will be. But yeah, it's and like with the we were saying with maps, I mean the talent usually gets what I'm going for when it's all on the page thematically, and because I am producing, writing, directing, and whatnot, I do format my scripts format wise normally, but I do allow myself to be more flowery in the direction of like the scene and character
You're saying you
description
like to
and stuff like
overwrite your
that.
scripts a little bit just because it's for personal satisfaction, and you can actually remember the vision you have if you.
Yeah, I mean both for me, and then kind of it's pre-direction for actors. I think traditionally, if a real like Hollywood type like got one of my scripts, they'd be like, there's way too much direction in this. This is
I
there's
can
no room
relate.
for the director
I
to
can definitely
yeah
relate.
yeah yeah yeah.
Yeah. My type of writing, which I'm very aware of this, and I try to avoid it. But so I don't necessarily avoid it entirely, but I try to keep it to a minimum because I do like to think that each writer has their strength, and sometimes a writer's strength is if it's not dialogue, it might be being flowery with the action or the
Right.
direction. Just to be able to clearly see exactly what they are thinking about that reminds them of how it's going to sound, how it's going to be edited, and just being able to remember all the details that your vision is reminding you of on the page, even though it might not technically be the best way to write a screenplay. If you're self, directing
Right.
your screenplay, it's arguably the best way, in my opinion, to break the rules because there is an advantage to it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is definitely in many ways harder being a auteur type, but there are things that when I am writing, I am considering director Eric and editor Eric, and like when I am directing, I am also being considerate of the editor, myself. So it's like I am doing things a little bit more selfishly, but the people that are impacted by my selfishness are myself. So I am curbing, it a little bit, but it is kind of like a checks and balances. I am the rock, the paper, and the scissors, so I can uh, adjust the levels between those things.
Mm-hmm. What
Alchemy wise, I like the word alchemy.
I mean, it makes you sound like a wizard, but also like a
Yep,
scientist at the
yep,
same time. Because
yep, yep.
alchemy historically is one of those areas where it was a blend between the two. You really didn't know what was
Mm-hmm.
what. Isaac Newton loved
Did you hear
alchemy.
they actually did it? They used the hadron collider to turn lead into gold. Like they actually for
I
real.
heard that they manipulated some type of particle to be able to change its properties, but I'm not exactly sure exactly what that entailed. Because I
It's
got
the
that nerdy
closest we're
bent.
gonna get.
I like to try to keep up with that. That and the James Webb Space Telescope.
Right? Yep, yep.
That's an amazing piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know why humanity isn't hailing that as the technological feat that it is. We also
Yeah.
spend an insane amount of money on it. It's like
Right,
what, a
right, right.
$1 billion telescope
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
started 20 years ago. But
I'm sure once we can apply some of the data gathered, people will care much more when.
well, that's and I've said this on the show before is that a great artist also has a scientific bent to them because it satisfies a different aspect of curiosity about the world and the universe that they live in that
Right,
they're
right.
also making art and commentating on. Isaac
Mm-hmm.
Newton was also a painter. He was into alchemy as well. With his original, he studied alchemy as well as the aspects of science that led him to his particular discoveries about how physics works and whatnot.
Yeah,
And so I think some artists would benefit from doing a little bit less art and maybe just going into those types of spaces and satisfying or cultivating even a particular sense of curiosity about the world, even if it's just not something that they're necessarily familiar with. What do you think?
1000%. Absolutely. Vice versa too. Some of the there's I need two hands to count how many there's up here at the OSU campus. There's Buckeye Stand Up Club. And some of these young prodigy type guys that are in college and still pursuing comedy enough to do it good. Like half of them are like fucking like computer engineer science type. It goes the other way totally. Like left brain type people like need to get out. Science types need to get out their art as well. But like I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree. And it's like you think paint was invented by some artsy fartsy weed smoking whatever? No, man, it was some lab rat. It's like it's all we need, all things to get to all things. So everything has worth.
Is there a particular non-artistic point of interest that you think that you're interested in that also affects your art?
um I think
Because for me, it's like it's also reading ancient history as well as
right,
um, science. Like I really
right,
like to. I've been lately studying the way like light bends through particular
right, right.
objects, and the
Hmm.
visual imagery that comes to my mind
Yeah, yeah,
is just
okay, yeah,
like,
yeah. I
okay, how
was
could I get
yeah.
that on screen? Like, what would that look like on camera?
Well,
Like,
you
because
know
you start to
the
wonder, like, oh, how can I manipulate this thing that's never been manipulated before in the way that I'm seeing it in my head? So there's the
the perfect
curiosity is like one of
example of
those
that.
things that are like they avalanche into other things.
Remember telling a girl on a date, applying that direct thing. For me, the perfect example is in either version of The Office when they're outside of the boss's office and he's got the blinds down but parallel to the ground,
Mm-hmm.
where you can you focus in and you rack and the light bends around the blinds, and you can see through. You can see the image clearly through the window, even though there are blinds. You know what I mean? You'll
Yeah.
have to throw up a little visual reference for the for the watchers there. So there is an applied, yeah. Applying sciences like that. I totally get you. I will say my first instinct, and when you say non-artistic, I think the ratio of art versus entertainment is a lot different in video games, you know. And I'm
Mm,
absolutely not saying that video games aren't art type thing. Like Last of Us, like might be my favorite story, like cumulatively, like one and two.
mm,
But like I play a lot of video games that are purely mechanically and entertaining, like pieces of entertainment, and I am a gamer, you know, and I do, and I can tell, I think, when directors are gamers too, and like some camera motions and like uh yeah, I feel like I feel like the visual language of video games and some the nature of the empathy machine does really speak a lot to the stuff that I make, even though video games is one of the few things that I don't make myself.
if if you had a if you had a proper budget, what type of story would you want to tell?
For like a feature film,
Yeah, for filmmaking.
a murder mystery set during the blizzard of 1978.
Very specific.
Copyright, 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 copyright. Like it's a great idea, but it would be that is the like that requires budget because there was an alien planet during that blizzard of 78, and I think that would just be a cool. I might want to pitch the Coen brothers. That should be your last movie, man. But yeah, that's been a dream project. I've had a couple short film versions of variations of. I would really do want to make a story about employees of a movie theater, whether it just be like a regular dramedy type thing or like a horror comedy, whatever. Like you know that the for whatever reason the instinct to do your first feature is like, oh, we'll do horror, we'll do things that require
Especially as an
money and blood
indie
and
film.
special
Yeah.
effects, and yeah, everybody is obsessed with that. And like I kind of understand why, because even a bad horror movie is a good horror movie. But
There's some truth
like
to that.
why would you not start with something that is cheaper to make and more approachable? Because yes, a lot of people will watch whatever horror just because, but some people won't because they don't like it. But yeah, I think like a Adventurelands, but at a movie theater type thing has been floating in my head around a lot. I think, especially if it were more comedic, I think you know, people give Family Guy a lot of shit for making too many pop culture references, which is a valid criticism. But I think that employees at a movie theater would, I believe that they would be making movie references all day. So I think that it would feel more natural, a little less Kevin Smith y if people are having conversations like that in a setting conducive to folks like that. I mean, there's a little Western set built out somewhere. I think it would be cool to do something post-Western. I'm a huge Deadwood guy and Red Dead for sure. And I think it's been so temperamental with popularity, the Western genre coming back and disappearing and coming back, that it's there's something there.
Well, the Wild West was not too long ago.
Right,
You know,
right, right,
it was not very long ago. It's not like we're it's barely older than World War II, than World War One. You
right.
know,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, people when they were making westerns,
If
during that time, there was a lot closer to home. That's like because before when they
right,
were making westerns, it was primarily that was something that was taking place like 50, 60 years ago. People had grandpas who were cowboys that were
right,
like, "Oh yeah,
right.
yeah, stuff like that kind of happened."
It's like samurai were around. Were still around when the typewriter was invented. I like to.
Hmm.
It's weird to think about, but uh, yeah. Oh shit. Oh, yeah, if you're into that recency of the Western, did you play that first Red Dead Redemption
No,
game?
I haven't.
It's set in 1911. Um, and I have a feeling it's set in 1911 just so they can have the gun, the 1911,
Probably.
the first, But I mean, but even thematically, it's not a revolver, it's a gun. It's emblematic of, but that first Red Dead Redemption is about like the death of the West or whatever, and like it really is like the latest a classical Western type thing. I think you'd be into that if you're a gamer at all.
I do. Well, the games that I play tend to be more strategic or whatever.
Yeah.
Like what
Hmm.
I have Risk on my phone,
Okay. Okay.
but I like I'm a classic like MMORPG guy myself.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll hop on and I'll play Elder Scrolls Online, and
Right.
but
Oh my
lately
God, I'm
my
playing
drug
that.
of choice has been Magic the Gathering, so it's not even a video game.
Hmm. Right. Right. Well, they had an MTG. They had like a wasn't there like a PlayStation version at one
There's
point
a
or
there
something?
actually
Or
now that you say that there is a PC version
yeah.
of it. So
Uh, if you're a numbers go up guy, are you hip to this Balatro thing? You know Balatro?
no, I don't. Enlighten me.
Oh man. It's basically solitaire but poker. You're given all your cards and like you put down a poker hand and you'll get a certain amount of points, but then you get these little varietals where it's like, hey, hearts and diamonds are the same suit, so it's easier to make a flush, or like, hey, you get double points if you don't use any face cards. And it's like you
It's an
get all these
augmented card game.
weird, yeah, and like it is the most addictive, and it's on every platform ever. If you're an iPhone, it's on the Apple Arcade thing for free. It's everywhere, and like people who know about it, I'm sure if there's going to be if you usually get only one or two YouTube comments, I'm sure that one person might go Balatro mentioned because
Well, I
it's
mean, if they don't, I'm gonna have to rely on you to leave something there just to
right,
make
right,
sure that that we have all
right.
bases are covered.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Right, right.
um, well, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience concerning just creativity in the arts?
Um, not
Do more
really,
drugs, do
man.
less drugs.
Yeah, I mean, weed's legal now, and it's for a reason, and I don't know. I don't feel like I have to advocate for that anymore. I'm sure even all the cool moms have their little edibles and whatnot. But if for whatever reason, I know we were joking, but if for whatever reason people are anti-weed, stop doing that. But yeah, man, you can at Eric underscore Basso underscore is my Instagram and my Venmo.
Oh, okay. Well,
Um,
if just free tips, I mean, if I send you on Venmo, are you gonna give me like a good quality feet pick? I would expect that
yes,
in return.
well, I mean, that's OnlyFans has been experimenting and trying to reach out into the comedy world, so maybe I'll get a sponsorship with them at some point. Oh, they just announced the lineup for the Columbus Comedy Festival in
Oh,
September,
okay.
and I believe yeah, I've got a late night live with Eric Basso on the 5th or 6th or something. But yeah, the festival's gonna be dope. It's gonna be Pauly Shore is gonna be there. There's gonna be a whole bunch of people from regional and
Yeah, I
across
might
the
head up there
country.
because like I've I when I had Jules on, she was telling me about the comedy scene up in Columbus, which seems to be
Mm-hmm.
popping off kind of
Right, right.
lately. It seems to be pretty active now. So yeah,
Now,
maybe what?
had she started? How recent was this interview? Because she did
This was
the
like a couple months ago.
Okay. Because did she tell you about our project that we did? Her first acting gig?
Well, I think I actually might have saw it. Was it the short film that you
Yeah, the
sent?
finger food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Finger Food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was
Um,
wearing this
she
shirt
was
on that.
well. I was introduced to her through Ashley, actually, because
Hey,
I guess
right.
yeah. So
Met at the screening. Yes. I specifically remember that. Yeah, nobody. Yeah, Ashley hung out with us at the 48 screening. I think Dwayne and who else was on her team? Yeah, nobody else on that team showed up to the screening, so she had to be there and accept an award for somebody. But she hung out with me and Katie and Jules at that screening there. That was a
hmm
fun time. I think that might have been where I said, hey, let's do the winter film thing. That might have been where we made that connection. So very cool.
sweet.
But yeah, that's very cool. I as much as love working with professionals like Brandy and Ashley, like I love working with non-actors and like comedians
They're willing to
because they're
try a lot of different things because they
yeah,
also partly they
they
don't know
don't
any
know what
better.
they don't know.
Yeah,
And like
they don't
the
know any
people
better.
that are yeah, and like the people that are obsessed with the image of being an actor and doing all the BTS and this and that and the other, and like all the people that are in it for selfish reasons or whatever, those it's harder to crack those facades when I'm trying to direct someone like that. But yeah, she killed it, and she won Best Actress for her first acting role, and so that was a very cool moment. I'm very happy to play a small role and her getting all the flowers she deserves, and she pivoted to acting after that. So yeah, very cool.
Well, Eric, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this, man.